Good morning, everyone. Welcome to TeleShadowing. We are live on YouTube. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat box as we go along and they'll be addressed. I'm honored to introduce our mentor for today, Dr. Hatem Al-Haj. Dr. Hatem Al-Haj is the Director of On-Site Pediatrics at Shore Medical Center in New Jersey. He received his medical degree from Alexandria University Medical School and is certified by the American Board of Pediatrics, and is a fellow at the American Academy of Pediatrics. He also received a master's degree in Islamic law from the American Open University and a PhD in comparative fiqh, which is Islamic jurisprudence, from El-Jinan University in Lebanon. Right now, he is a member of the Permanent Fatwa Committee in the Assembly of Muslim Jurists in America and the Dean of the College of Islamic Studies at Mishkat University, and continues to be an important mentor for me. And now it is my honor to request Dr. Hatem Al-Haj to begin today's session. Thank you.
Well, Jazakallah khair, Hamza, for the introduction. And as I told Hamza, it's a little bit hard to talk about your personal life, I guess. But I'll try to go through it quickly. And if anyone found the inspiration, I don't find much inspiration. But if anyone did find any inspiration, then it would be the fadl of Allah, the grace and bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I was born in Cairo, Egypt, and I currently live in New Jersey. Certainly lived in different places at different times, but this is where I was born and this is where I live now. And I'm married and I have 4 children. I have 1 boy and 3 girls, and they are between 21 and 27. I just wanted to share a little bit about my illness, because there are, some lessons to be learned, I guess. I had trauma. This was basically a fight in front of one of the masajid in Astoria, Queens. How many years ago? Maybe 30 years ago. Almost 30 years ago, and the fight was caused by the fact that the muazzin was very insistent on raising the adhan outside the masjid, and a fight ensued between the muazzin and 5 people who were drunk, which is not certainly a good idea to fight with drunk people. And then I got involved because I felt the sort of obligation to not leave the muazzin alone, and some other people got involved. So anyway, nobody knows what happened to me at the time. Someone threw a ceiling lamp on me, and I sustained like significant trauma to my left shoulder. And then 2 years later, I started to have sort of pain throughout my body, like fibromyalgia type pain. And there may be a lesson to be learned here, because many people would sort of downplay this diagnosis, and others that they cannot really point a finger to or put their finger on. Which is unfair to the patient who has the disease. So my knowledge of this disease, we call this in mantiq ilm huduri, not ilm, tahsili. It is knowledge that you do not acquire. It is knowledge that you feel. Certainly you feel your own pain. And I have this pain ever since, and I think it's been more recognized now as a true diagnosis, fibromyalgia. But when I first started to have the condition, it was less recognized. And the second thing to be learned here is that I suffered from this sort of it's not severe. I can't say it is severe pain, but when it is constant 24/7, it becomes was sort of worse than any severe pain. If you have like a moderate pain, like 5 out of 10, 24/7, it becomes very draining. So I had an exacerbation of this pain during my residency, and that was like a time to decide what I will do with myself. I actually attended a support group for people who have this type of pain, and most of them were unemployed or thinking about unemployment. So that was not particularly encouraging. Yet I just decided to live with the pain, sort of to accept the fact that I will have the pain and to live with the pain and not allow it to basically not bar me from fulfilling my potential if I have any good potential in any field of interest of mine. So that is for people who do encounter hardships in life. I still have the pain, it's still chronic, it's still 24/7, but I hope that I did not allow it to devastate my sort of life. Okay, so for my education, I had like I was always interested in Islamic education and started at age 9 at a local masjid, which was particularly interested in education, particularly interested in education of youngsters. So alhamdulillah, that was the ni'mah and tawfiq of Allah to allow me to live close to that masjid. So although it was like a bad decision, but they allowed me to be the khatib when I was 17. So I was sort of invested in Islamic sciences and Islamic education before I went to medical school. And when, after high school in Egypt, because I was, I grew up in Egypt. So after high school of Egypt, it's the time to decide what you want to study. And it is always based on your sort of GPA, I guess, in whatever that means in Egypt. So I wanted to study Islamic studies or Arabic, and my mother insisted that I study medicine. And basically, like in many places, it's the upper crust of students that go to medical school. And since my GPA allowed me to go to medical school, my mother insisted that I go to medical school. So I went. But at the same time, I also went to the agreement, the compromise with her is that she will allow me to go to a mahad after hours in the evening, like an Islamic institute. And I went to Mahad al-Furqan. And I tried to do my best anyway in both Islamic and medical studies during my college years. And then I came to America. And during my residency, I was, before my residency, when I came to America, actually, I was the imam of a masjid for 2 years before I embarked on the residency. So I was the imam of a masjid in Astoria, Queens. It's called Masjid al-Bir, from the end of 1991 to 1994, to the beginning, March 1994. So a little bit more than 2 years. And then when I started my residency, I was involved in helping Sheikh Salah Hassawi, who is the Secretary General of the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America now, in starting a university called the American Open University. So I was assisting because I was the imam at the masjid in Astoria. So I was bringing some students for the university and so on. And I decided to basically pursue my master's during my residency years. with the American Open University. It had gotten accreditation from Al-Azhar, so it was an opportunity to pursue my master's with them, or actually like mutual recognition from Al-Azhar, not accreditation, mutual recognition. So, so then I studied my master's with them, and when I finished the master's, I went to Lebanon with the master's to study a PhD there in comparative fiqh, and I was accepted into Al-Jinan University. So, you know, sometimes, like all of this, like sometimes, for instance, you need to take your boards. So the one thing that I did not abandon was my revision of the Quran. However, when I had to take my boards, for instance, I would put my Islamic studies on pause until I get done with that. And then and certainly when I was doing my PhD, I took a lot of time off from work. And in order for you to straddle two fields, you will have to basically respect your capacities because you are not Superman. And there are people who are dedicated to one field and they're still struggling with it. So when you straddle two fields, you will have to respect your capacities. And you will have, and that's why I showed the picture on the bottom, you will have basically to commit to a life of learning because it's not like you will do sort of intensive for 15 years completely dedicated to one science or one group of sciences, and then you stop. No one should stop, even the people who did the intensive, the sort of the 15, 20-year intensive. They should still not stop learning. It's a lifelong pursuit. But particularly for someone who's trying to straddle two fields, you will have to pause sometimes, you will have to also, you know, dedicate the time to this and time to that every day of the year. So that takes away from your complete dedication to a field. But if you try to straddle two fields, you will have to also give up much of the other activities and interests and comforts, pleasures, etc., including sleep. So you will have to figure out how to cut down on sleep. And I have advised people before to try to do 15 minutes less every 2 weeks until you get to a point where you're not able to function well, or it's affecting you. Like if you cut down by 15 minutes and then 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 weeks later, you cut down by 15 more minutes. At one point, you will reach the threshold below which you will not be able to function well. And every one of us has a different threshold. So don't listen to people who tell you you could survive on 4 hours of sleep or 5 hours of sleep. Try it yourself, figure it out yourself for yourself gradually. And the final thing I wanted to add about straddling two fields is that if it is not really for Allah, it is basically hardship and misery, in fact, for no good purpose. Like if you're not doing this sincerely, it is just a misery for no good reason. Okay, so jobs and activities. I am a pediatric hospitalist, and so I actually the former dean of the College of Islamic Studies. So I have to update this. Former dean of the College of Islamic Studies at Mishka University, and a member of the Fatwa Committee of AMJA, and the chairman of the BOT at the Building Blocks of Islam, which is a grassroots organization. Well, these are the things that I would mention because they are part of like my regular activities, or like activities, at least like the last one is an activity that I cherish in particular, because it's grassroots, and it's an organization that we started in Minnesota a long time ago when people felt disenchanted with the masajid that they pray at. I brought like a bunch of younger people, not young in the sense of teenagers, like young adults, and we made an organization. I think it was started by like $4,000, and we collected about $4,000 from each other to start the organization. And as far as I can hear, their annual funds have surpassed $500,000 now. So it's just it's dear to my heart because and it's still a very active organization in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, a very active one. So it's dear to my heart because it shows that there should be no room for negativity. Instead of bickering and complaining about the masajid not giving you enough room, just start your own work, start your own initiative. Particularly for immigrants like us, we have many challenges coming into this country, and your parents, I'm presuming that most of you are first generation. Of course, some of you will not be. Some of you, came here, their families came here with Columbus. I do recognize this. Muslims are very diverse. But I'm an immigrant. My kids are considered first generation. I'm presuming that most of you are first generation. So your parents have done a great job in establishing institutions, building masajid, establishing organizations. If you think that they have not done well in running those institutions, inshallah, one day you will be in charge, and you'll be able to show your capacities and your dedication and your sincerity. Hopefully, you will do a better job than our generation. But at the same time, I don't think that you need to be rushing to remove them. I've never been involved in any posts like this. I dislike them for myself, but I do see that sometimes people are just like too angry because they are just angry. Yet, and instead of complaining, start your own organization. I mean, if you guys grew up here and you know the language and the culture, you want to start your own organization, and it's very easy. I think the application, you just pay $50 and you establish a non-for-profit organization. So it's a simple application, and that's much better than being negative. So anyway, I'm a pediatric hospitalist, and if you're interested a little bit more about this, I worked as like the 360 pediatrician doing hospital medicine, outpatient medicine in Minnesota. When I moved to New Jersey, but I was doing part-time most of my life because I needed to study, I needed to do my PhD, and I needed to do things. But when I came to New Jersey, I felt that the most suitable arrangement for me is to work as a pediatric hospitalist. You do certain shifts, 24-hour shifts, and the rest of the month is yours for whatever activities you want to engage in. So that's why I prefer to work as a pediatric hospitalist. At the same time, I don't dislike medicine. I actually like medicine, and I feel good about my career. I value this career, and I like to treat my patients well. And I like also to, although I am not going to be the best pediatrician, and I don't have time to be the best pediatrician or the most learned pediatrician, but I also want to be competent to not hurt my patients and to provide them good care. So I'm in my mid-50s, but when I heard that there is that they started the new boards, I guess the newest boards are the Pediatric Hospital Medicine boards. So I decided that I would actually take the test. And I spent a lot of effort because in your mid-50s, it's very hard for you to basically study for exams. But I spent a lot of effort, and alhamdulillah, I passed my boards in November last year. During this time, I still had my sort of religious activities and commitments to religious activities, but I would slow down. You have to understand that sometimes, because of this straddling of two fields, you just have to slow down. Then areas of interest. My areas of interest are fiqh and related sciences. That was my area of interest since I was a child, and that was my master's and PhD. All of them were in comparative fiqh, and I am a Hanbali. I believe that having a madhab for anchorage is important, but then exposure to the other madhab without any contempt of any madhab or any sort of boasting or excessive zeal for your own is important, extremely important for the student of knowledge. Adequate exposure.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Hatem. We have some non-Muslims in the audience. Can you just explain what the definition of some of the terms you've used are?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't know that. So, fiqh means Islamic law. So Islamic law is not. It's not like American law. So Islamic law would include, acts of worship, how to pray, how to fast, things of that nature. The laws pertaining to marriage and divorce, the laws pertaining to inheritance, laws pertaining to financial transactions, and certainly the judiciary. That would be part of Islamic laws as well, or Islamic law as well. Then, the other area of interest, because of my involvement in medicine, my other area of interest was the interface between fiqh and medicine. And my PhD actually is, so the title of my PhD is أثر تطور المعارف الطبية على تغير الفتوى والقضاء, which would mean the impact of the advancement in medical sciences on the change of religious edicts and the judiciary. Then tazkiyah, which is basically purification of the heart, refinement of character, is my other area of interest. And I believe that fiqh and tazkiyah are extremely important. Theology, which is the aqidah, that would be most important, because the most important thing for us Muslims are the foundations of creed and the belief in God and the oneness of God, the prophethood and resurrection. These are the three main beliefs. I should have put this first, but that is in terms of importance from an Islamic perspective. But in terms of my interests, this is the order, because I am primarily a jurist. So this is my interests in order, not the order from an Islamic perspective or from importance in Islam, because creed should come before law, of course. Then Islamic thought and reform is also an area of interest for me, because I grew up in Egypt, and seeing all the turmoil that my country, my home country or original country, is going through, it makes me certainly concerned for the well-being of Egyptians and the rest of Muslims, because it seems that the conditions are similar in many Muslim places. So these are some of my publications. So in Arabic, the book, which is my dissertation, was published in a book, and I wrote a book also to show the differences between the authorized position. That's another Arabic book to show the difference between the authorized position in Hanbali law, according to the middle generation of Hanbalis, which lasted about 400 years, and the latter generation, which lasted about the last 400 years as well. And in English, I think my sort of largest book in English would be the explanation of a Hanbali book on jurisprudence, which is called the Umdat al-Fiqh Explained, that shows on the top left, and then Stations of the Travelers. This is a commentary. As I said to you, my main interest is in fiqh, and I believe that fiqh is important for tazkiyah, by the way, and I believe that fiqh is a way for people to experience faith and to have more like confirmation of their faith, because the beauty and the symmetry of the Islamic laws and the principles of the legal principles gives me that sort of faith boost, if you may. So the second from the left would be the Stations of the Travelers, and this is like a translation and commentary on the 100 stations of refinement of character and development of devotion to God. The third is about an explanation of Athari Creed, which is scriptural creed, that is basically scriptural creed, anyway, textual creed. And then the last one is about male-female interaction in Islam. And there is one about love and hate in Islam, which discusses the concept of wala and bara, loyalty and disavowal, or love and hate. And tries to dispel some of the misconceptions about this concept, that misconceptions that Muslims could have, or others as well. And that is it, I believe.
Thank you for your mentorship and teaching, Dr. Al-Haj. We will now begin our Q&A session. So you spoke earlier about how you used to be a khatib and an imam at a masjid, and you spoke about fatwas. Since we have some people in the audience who may be unfamiliar with such terms, can you explain what those three terms are?
Oh, khatib would be the speaker, though, who delivers the Friday sermon. Imam would be the person who leads the people in prayer. And the last one was fatwa.
Yes, fatwa.
Fatwa is a religious edict. It's a religious decree.
Now, this next question is, again, a little bit about terminology. The prior one was something for our non-Muslim audience because they may not be familiar with such terms. But I know that a lot of Muslims are also unfamiliar with terms like madhab, madahib, and Hanbali. Can you just give a short rundown of what these concepts mean?
Yeah, so madhab is a school of legal thought, a school of legal thought. And certainly, the Prophet had left us the Quran, the book of God, and his Sunnah. But the Sunnah and the Quran are not codified laws. So to say what is haram, what is halal, the Sunnah and Quran don't speak in such terms. They speak in terms of do this, don't do that, this is good, etc. So to codify, to assign a legal value for every human action is the work of the jurists. They are called fuqaha. So to tell that, there are 5 legal values or 7, depending on the person's school of legal thought. So the 5, which is a little bit easier, is permissible, which is neutral in the middle. It's up to you, do it, don't do it, no problem. And then on the 2 sides of permissible, which is mubah, we have the concept of recommended and discouraged. So recommended would be mustahab, but discouraged would be makruh. And then we have 2 other layers where the demand to do something or to refrain from it is more emphatic. So if there is an emphatic demand, then it would be obligatory or prohibited. So the fuqaha or the jurists, that's their work. They try to assign a legal value for every human action based on the Quran, the book of God, and the Sunnah, which is the way of the Prophet. So that's that. Hanbali is basically a reference to a legal school of thought that was founded by Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who lived in Baghdad, Iraq, between 164 to 241 after the Hijrah of the Prophet in the Islamic calendar. So that's about 1200 years ago. And there are 4 such founders of the Madhahib. They start with Imam Abu Hanifa, who lived between 80 and 150 after Hijrah. And then you have Imam Malik, who lived between 93 or 97, still controversial, and 179 after Hijrah. And then you have Imam Shafi'i, who lived between 150 and 204 after Hijrah. And the last one was Imam Ahmad, who lived between 164 and 241 after Hijrah. So these are the 4 most recognized legal schools of thought that have many followers in Muslim countries, which does not mean that there were no other legal schools of thought, but these are the ones that are most recognized with sort of ongoing followership since their establishment.
Our next question is about AMJA. So what is the Assembly of Islamic Jurists in America, or Muslim Jurists in America, and what is its primary function?
So the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America is it is like a fiqh academy, like the International Islamic Fiqh Academy that belongs to the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They convene to discuss certain matters of interest from Islamic legal perspective, and to issue decrees and declarations to clarify the Islamic position or Islamic ruling on different issues, mainly issues that we consider to be newly emerged issues, because you don't convene, you don't bring people from different parts of the world to discuss, how to make ruku and salah, for instance, because that discussion has been, thoroughly exhausted by the scholars before. But things like removal of life support, for instance, we had like an issue recently about triplets, and one of them it was having growth restriction. Is it allowable to clamp the cord so that the 2 others can survive and not get born prematurely? So things of that nature. These are things that our earlier scholars have not addressed because they were not around.
Now, adding a little bit more about AMJA, I've noticed that the coming conference this year is about the relationship between fiqh and medicine. Can you expand a little bit more about that relationship?
Okay, so there are many different, so there is more than one interface between fiqh and medicine because the relationship is basically mutual. It is bidirectional. So fiqh impacts medicine, medicine impacts fiqh. So many things in fiqh are dependent on medicine to clarify for us. So the jurist that says removal of life support is okay, that jurist has to be educated by the medical community on what life support is, when would it be recommended to be removed, what are the consequences of this, what is the meaning of coma or persistent vegetative state, what do we mean by saying that this condition is irreversible, what is brain death, what's brain stem death versus cortex or cortical death, what is, so in order for the faqih to issue a religious edict, they have to be informed. Medicine also tells us the duration of pregnancy, the shortest duration of pregnancy. It tells us things about, menstrual period and things of that nature that could be impactful. And fiqh also controls medicine because there are Islamic bioethics. And there are, so it regulates, since fiqh, Islamic law has something to share about every human action. Most of the time it's permissibility. So it's not like a suffocating a code of laws. Most of the time, the position that the Islamic law would share about different activities, human activities, is just permissibility, because the default is permissibility when it comes to other than the worship of God. When it comes to the worship of God, you need to worship God as He prescribed. But when it comes to human interaction, human transaction, human activities, the default in Islam is permissibility. But then at the same time, people cross limits of Islamic ethics and Islamic values, and then you have to say that that's a red line, that is not to be crossed. And then there are things that are recommended in Islam, ethics that are to be upheld, and things that are obligatory on a Muslim physician to uphold, and on a Muslim patient also. Yeah, so there are different interfaces. It's a bidirectional relationship.
So, do you have any advice for some Muslim students who wish to pursue Islamic studies alongside either their graduate degrees or medical degrees?
I think I tried to answer this during my talk as much as I could. Mm-hmm. So it will be mainly about sincerity and humility, because you really need to do this for the sake of Allah, for your own betterment, not to be sort of significant or recognized or show off your knowledge when you go to the masjid for Aisha, because these are all very, very sort of inappropriate reasons to spend your life and to lose sleep, and to also, to some extent, compromise on your career, because there will be some sacrifices also in terms of your career. You always need to be a competent provider or physician. I guess all of you are going to be. So you always want to be a competent physician, but at the same time, there are levels of competency, and certainly dedication to one science, which many Muslims should dedicate themselves to medicine only. The straddling of two fields is not for everyone. And I I was asked by someone last night. I was here in where am I? I'm in Michigan, presenting. I was at Miftah Institute here in Michigan, and I met a third-year medical student last night, and he asked me this question, and I said, he asked me about whichever direction he should take, and I told him, would you like to be an educated Muslim or a Muslim educator, or Islamic educator? That there is difference between both. So an educated Muslim can be done very well, and you could be very educated Muslim, very informed Muslim with complete dedication to your career. So you could basically win the Nobel Prize in medicine while having spent enough time to learn your deen and to even memorize the Quran and so on and so forth. But if you want to straddle two fields, because sometimes we need people who do straddle them, then you may not, you may need to work part-time. You will not be doing research like all the time, or may never do any research in medicine because you have limited bandwidth, limited capacity. You at least want to be a competent physician, at least want to be an educated Muslim, and more depends on your capacities and your interests, your inclinations. If you're really into Islamic sciences and you really want to be an Islamic educator, that's like a sheikh type thing, then you will really have to cut down on your involvement in your career. You will work often part-time. You may want to choose a specialty that will allow you that freedom and that extra time and so on. Because you're not Superman or woman. You have a limited bandwidth, you have a limited capacity. There's a certain number of hours in the day that you work with.
Thank you for that question. That was I didn't even think of it that way, that it would take time away from your main career. I always thought that it's just these two things and they would take away time from other things, but not take time away from each other as well.
No, they would. We have to be honest, because like how much free time do you have? And in order for you to dedicate yourself to Islamic sciences, that takes a lot of effort. That takes daily studies, a lot of effort. So certainly there have to be some sacrifices. But as you said, it does take away from other things, a lot of other things.
Now, our final question related to Islam as a whole. How has your study of Islam helped you as a doctor, particularly when it comes to the spiritual dimensions of patient care?
Okay, so the worldview that you have as a Muslim, you believe that that God created this universe. You believe that He created it for a purpose. You believe that there is resurrection and there is basically a time for the full establishment of justice. And I personally have an optimistic theodicy, but so coming into medicine with this worldview is very different from coming into medicine with a worldview that removes God from the picture completely. And then, so when we have to deal with a lot of suffering, disease, suffering, death, and so on. So this, it depends on your worldview and it depends on your theological anchorage. This may lead you to becoming cruel and brutal and insensitive and inconsiderate, and or it may lead you to become compassionate, kind, and to basically to be grieving all the time for human suffering, but deny God. Or it may lead you to combine between, compassion for humanity and recognition of God, and to understand that the life of this world is but a test, and it was meant to be a test and a trial for an ultimate purpose and a greater wisdom that we may not completely encompass or wrap our heads around.
Right.
So I think that, I hope that I was able to do the last one, which is that, to continue to be sensitive to human suffering without denying God.
Now we will be switching to questions related specifically to the pediatric specialty and your life as a physician. So, why did you decide to go into pediatrics specifically?
Well, as I told you, you have to choose a specialty that will allow you to dedicate a lot of time to Islamic studies, and pediatrics was such a specialty. Also, I did very well in pediatrics in medical school. So sometimes these things leave an impression on you, and so yeah. Additionally, I just have to tell you everything with all honesty. I am a foreign medical graduate, so we have we have some limitations in terms of specialties that we choose.
How long is the pediatric residency?
It's 3 years.
Okay. So as a pediatric hospitalist, what is your day-to-day work like, and how do you balance seeing patients?
So you basically go to work. It depends on when. So pediatric hospitalists, sometimes they do 12-hour shifts, and sometimes they do 24-hour shifts. So it depends on how busy the service is. In busy services, you do 12-hour shifts. And in not that busy services, you do 24-hour shifts. So I have been doing 24-hour shifts most of my career in pediatric hospital medicine, because I work in places that are not that busy. So sometimes we start to sign out at 7 o'clock in the morning, and this is one thing that I would advise you to do. You want to be there all the time, 10 to 15 minutes early, so that you start on time, because it is not your colleague's fault that there was traffic. Traffic should never be an excuse, because you should always, make provisions for that, because there's always going to be traffic. So you start early, and like you wake up early, or you don't sleep after a Fajr prayer, and you just get to work, and then we finish the sign out by like 7:20, 7:30. It depends on the number of patients we have. Sometimes in some hospitals, they do the switch of shifts at 8 in the morning. In most places, it's at 7 o'clock. And then basically you do rounds. And in some hospitals, you do rounds alone. And in other hospitals, you do rounds with an entourage of people, the nurse, social worker, respiratory therapist, medical students, residents if there are residents, case management, and the nursing supervisor sometimes can join the team. And for us, also in pediatric hospital medicine, sometimes we cover the nursery, and sometimes we don't. They have neonatologists on call. So if we cover the nursery, sometimes we often huddle with the OB people when they do their huddle. So sometimes this happens after you finish your rounds, in the middle of rounds, or before you start your rounds. You do your huddles with OB to just familiarize yourself with patients in labor and their condition, whether they they have their GBS positive, group B strep positive or not, their history in pregnancy, complications, so that you could expect what comes out. And then you do your discharges, you do your paperwork, and whether you will have enough sometime to wind down before lunch or not. It depends on how many patients you have and the intensity of the cases. And then you have your lunch, and most of the time, honestly speaking, for me, after this, you're just waiting for somebody to call you. And then we do sort of evening rounds later at the change of nursing shift. But at 7 p.m., we do like evening rounds, which are more brief than the morning rounds. But to check on your patients before you go to bed. And then you're sitting in your on-call room, reading whatever you want, studying whatever you want, and waiting for somebody to call you for a rapid response, waiting for somebody to call you because a patient needs you to explain something that you already explained to them in the morning, but they need a re-explanation. So you should always try to be, you should try to be as dutiful to your patients as possible. And if a patient needs repetition, then you do that.
Now, did you see pediatric patients during the COVID-19 pandemic? And if so, what was the experience like for you?
So yes, I did see a lot of pediatric patients during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, I work in a community hospital. So I admitted some of those patients when the respiratory condition was not concerning. A patient that needs to be admitted with COVID for respiratory distress would usually be transferred to a tertiary care center. So the patients that we would admit are the patients that were not drinking well and maybe getting dehydrated. They need IV fluids and things of that nature. Patients in respiratory distress, or patients that were having some respiratory symptoms, but nothing really that would require oxygen supplementation. Because certainly in community hospitals, we put people on high flow, we put people on oxygen, we put people on high flow nasal cannula, and so on. And we can use CPAP even or BiPAP for a short period of time. But for COVID patients in particular, because the COVID patients who were treated by medications, who required treatment by medications for respiratory distress, needed to be in a tertiary care center. So I did not take care of those patients. I took care of the COVID patients who had sort of mild to moderate dehydration, took care of COVID patients who had some mild respiratory symptoms and needed to be observed for them. Yeah.
Now we have one follow-up for the COVID question. How would you differentiate between a Kawasaki disease from MIS-C in COVID in children?
Well, the Kawasaki and MIS-C and COVID, usually MIS-C comes after COVID. Usually it comes in the wake of COVID within a few weeks of the disease. So you would have some history. Some history is important to basically sort these things out, in the family, the personal history and family history. Some history would be important. And then there are certainly a lot of similarities between the two. So the history of COVID is really an important means of the distinction. And then there are two layers of testing that you perform when you're trying to exclude MIS-C. So the first layer of testing will point you to doing the expanded testing, which includes 15 different tests. And then you have criteria, guidelines produced by the American Academy of Pediatrics for the diagnosis of MIS-C based on the clinical data that you've collected and the lab tests. Kawasaki, you have to have, it depends on whether you're trying to diagnose a complete Kawasaki or an incomplete Kawasaki or atypical Kawasaki. But the typical or the complete Kawasaki, you have some strict criteria: fever for 5 days, and then you have the other clinical, mainly clinical criteria that you have to meet. But lack of history of COVID would be quite helpful to point you more towards Kawasaki. 5 days of fever also is helpful in the diagnosis of Kawasaki, although that could be true with MIS-C as well. But then with Kawasaki, the features of MIS-C could emulate the features of Kawasaki, but the features of Kawasaki are more sort of prominent and clear-cut for people who have been seeing Kawasaki forever. They sort of develop a skill of diagnosing Kawasaki on the spot.
Okay. And now we have just 2 more questions. Why do you think mental health related cases in children are rising? And do you think it could be related to the rise of social media?
Yes, of course. Mental health issues have been rising for kids, but that is before social media. That's because so honestly speaking, there with the institution of the family, the institution of the family has suffered since World War II for various reasons. And when a child goes back home and doesn't find someone to confide in and someone to complain to, when a child is basically kept busy by TV because everybody else is busy at home and they don't have time for him or her to stimulate their sort of thinking or to talk to them or to let them vent out and so on. I think all of these things have consequences, and we're seeing some of the consequences of the inconsistent care we provide to kids. And then social media came to add to the drama. And certainly they have caused rapid escalation in the problems that we're seeing, mental health problems among children.
Now, our last question, given pediatrics is also heavily involving parents, how have you managed their relationship when their parents are sometimes overbearing or help with the exam and ask a lot of questions?
No, can you repeat this, Hamza, please?
Sure. Given pediatrics also heavily involve the parents, how have you managed their relationships when parents are sometimes overbearing or help with the exam and ask a lot of questions?
Well, you have to understand that, first of all, you have to approach every human interaction from a place of compassion. So the first hadith that the scholars of hadith teach to each other when they meet, the first time they meet, is الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء أو يرحمكم من في السماء. So, which means merciful people will be shown mercy by the most merciful. Show mercy to the people on earth, that the one in the heavens may show mercy on you. So that it is important that you understand that parents are concerned. Parents may have, there is some degree of loss of credibility, or loss of trust in the medical community, that I don't believe in conspiracy theories, and I believe some people sometimes can be drowned in conspiracy theories, and I don't believe that the medical community is out there to hurt people. But some loss of credibility may be justified. So, because physicians are not always very ethical, or always looking out for the interest of the patient. So some loss of credibility may be justified. So you do want to approach things from a place of compassion, and you want to ease the concerns that the parents have as much as you can. Certainly, there are parents who are difficult and overbearing, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I chose pediatric hospital medicine over pediatric outpatient care. Because in pediatric outpatient care, they think that they can make a lot more decisions because their kids are not necessarily sick. But when their kids are sick, they are more willing to listen to expert opinion. So basically, you try to do your best. You try to be as forbearing and patient as you can, but you also have to set limits. You should not allow them to cause harm to their own kids. And sometimes they may need to be escalation to the ethics committee in your hospital. You need to involve the nursing supervisor if you're having like a lot of difficulty with one family. Involve the nursing supervisor in your hospital, and involve patient relations in your hospital. Let them come and talk to the family and figure out why are they so agitated or aggrieved. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, and Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Al-Haj. Those are all the questions we have for today. And we would like for everyone to give a warm thank you to Dr. Al-Haj in the chat box for his informative session. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I wish you the best in your careers and your all of your endeavors.
Now we're going to conduct our closing session with our quiz and future session dates. The link to the quiz for the session is now live. You will need a 70% or higher to pass and receive certification. Now on to our next session dates. These dates will also be posted throughout our social media outlets, so be sure to follow us at TeleShadowing. These dates will also be our next live session will be next Saturday, July 15th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for an ophthalmology session. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today's session. We hope to see you in upcoming sessions. This concludes this week's shadowing session. Thank you.